Hey viewers. So a while back I was checking my GitHub profile and suddenly noticed that my followers count went down, but my following count remained the same. So I thought that did someone intentionally follow me? I followed them back, and to maintain a ratio then they unfollowed me. Why would someone do that? And I was really curious that if someone is doing that or not. So I just made a small Golang project around it and tried getting the data with the help of GitHub APIs. And once I was done, I was sure that okay, no one is doing that. But one thing I realized is that this can be a good project for someone who's new to Golang and are trying and they want to level up and go in depth with Golang. So I thought like let's make a video around it. So this video is basically it will have some code snippets, Google searches, and everything. Basically, we'll be talking how to basically initialize a main function. From there, we will be talking about what are the APIs we will be using, and in the end, we can share that what would the final code snippet look like, and etc. So that's all in the video, and I hope this you find this video helpful so as to learn in depth. This video is not for someone who is experienced in Golang. This is for the newbies who are trying to get started with Golang, who know the basic syntaxes, but they want to make some project. So this video has that small level project, and this can be a good starter. From my perspective as well, this entire video making art is quite a new challenge for me. So just started with a basic video. Let's hope you find it interesting and you get your hands dirty with Golang and try to make things around it. To start our project, we will be creating a directory called as Unfollow, which is the name of the project. And inside that, we will be initializing our Git file. So let's change to the Unfollow directory. So we have to initialize our Git for this directory. And once we have switched to the Unfollow directory, let's create our very own Golang function. So for this, we will be doing a go mod init unfollow. So basically, we will be initializing Golang project in this uh, specified folder. You can just take it as the way npm init works or any other languages init function works. So basically, we are initializing, and the name of the package that we'll be using is unfollower. So as you can see, we have created a file called as go.mod, which basically has the name of the package and the version of code that we will be using. Now let's create our main.go file. So main.go file is a file which will be running, and it will be doing all our tasks, whatever we'll be coding, and the name can be anything, but for simplicity, let's keep it main.go for this file. One thing with Golang is that the main function, which will be the executable, should have a func package which should be called as main, and in that package there should be a function as well that should be called as main, failing to which the program won't run and would give error something. So let's try what would be the error if we name our package or the function something other than main. So as you can see, I have created a function called as main, and we will be printing a very simple hello world. Now for the sake of experiment, now let's just change the name of the package. While running this command, we will be running our main.go file via the go runtime. Basically, we are telling Go that hey, run this particular main.go file. And as expected, this would throw an error. If we highlight over this, it will say that the main package is unused, because what Golang is expecting is that this particular file, right, it is not the main executable. So it is like, okay, this function is not being used anywhere. So what Golang is expecting that this particular function should be used in another function with in a package called as main. So now let's change the name of our package, which is a main, and let's just change this function to be apple. So ideally, what we are asking our very Go program is that to run Apple function in the main.go file, which happens to be in the main package again. So the error which you get is the function main is undeclared in the package, meaning there has to have a main function in the main package in the executable which we are trying to run. So if we change this to main and try to run our application, we get a successful run. So at this point, we know how to write a basic Golang function and make it run. We know that this package main is important and necessary, as well as having a function name as main should be present in the package to make our executable run. But the goal of this video is not just to see how basic Golang function works, but to create a project. A project basically deals with the to list down those people whom you follow but they don't follow you back on GitHub. For this, we will be using GitHub APIs. Exactly what GitHub APIs will I be using? And if you were to start this project, what exactly GitHub APIs you would be searching for, or what are the things you would be looking for? So let's just start with a basic Google search. Our basic user search can be GitHub APIs to fetch followers. Now, if you visit the GitHub documentation, they have mentioned here that we can fetch the followers of an authenticated users, meaning the folks that follow the user, as well as list the people the authenticated user follows, meaning the followers, the folks that I follow. So we have two user groups. One user group contains the data of folks who follow me, and the other contains the data of folks I follow. So if we check all the users who I follow and check if they follow me back or not, basically checking data of one array in other, I can surely know how many people I follow but they don't follow me back. Does authenticated users mean? So basically, if you hit this curl command, you should have your token mentioned. So if we can generate this token and put in the curl command, then GitHub would treat you as an authenticated user and would give the list of people that you follow. But how do we get the developer token? For that, we go to GitHub, and in that, we can jump on to settings. While at settings, we can just move to our developer settings. From here, we can create a token. Let's generate a new token because why not? So let's just say, why do we need this token for? Let's just say that I want this token for my Unfollow project, and the expiration should be, for the purpose of this video, I would be setting it really soon. And what are the privileges that this token should have? Well, looking at most of the permissions, I don't think I need most of it. I would need users read data and users follow and follower data. I think this should be fine enough. Cool. Now let's just generate our fresh token. So this token that I generated can be used and would log me in as an authenticated user if I place it over here and make a curl request to the GitHub endpoint. So let's copy this curl from here and let's post it in our postman. In the postman, as you can see, we have to just replace our bearer token. So from here we can copy our personal token and replace it here. So these are the folks that I follow, right? And so how many user data am I seeing here? So let's just search for this parameter called as login. So this means that at the point we are looking for 30 users per request, meaning our pagination size is basically page sizes 30 at this point. Can we modify it? Let's go back to the documentation, and somewhere here is mentioned that basically per page we can see that how many users or how what is the number of results we get. So by default it is set to 30, but again we can change it to any number till 100. So now let's go to query parameter and test it up. So in the params we can paste it this per page here, and let's just try a number 35. Cool. So we see that there are 35 results. What if I change it to 100? So the number of users that I got is 44. But why 44? Because that's how many folks I follow. To get the folks who follow me, I can just go here and just see by changing this endpoint to this. So at the point I have somewhere around 169 followers. So in the first request I see just there are 100 data, and if I change the page number to, let's suppose, 2, I should be getting 69. So this is a way by which we can, so we have basically discussed the curls that we will be using for this project and how they will be helping us get what we want. So now that we have all the tools in hand, it's time for us to get started with the code part and make the application. So we will be storing our GitHub tokens and we will be using them to make the call. So let's just ensure that the tokens that we store aren't shared in the GitHub project by mistake by anyone. So for that we can just create something called as gitignore, and also create our .env file where we will be sharing the credentials. Now let's just call this to be auth, and from headers let's just copy our token. Cool. So we have made sure that the .env file shouldn't be uploaded. So for that let's mention it here and see. Cool. So we are sure that we won't be uploading our GitHub secret in the GitHub repo, and also we need to ensure that every user that tries to run the application, they don't have to manually change the program to update the environment key. So for this program to be used by any user, we should try to put it in the .env file from where it can be picked, and users just have to update their .env file, and the program would pick whatever is mentioned in the env file and would make necessary calls for that to get the required results. Now for that, how do we read the .env file in Go? For that we can install go.env. So we have installed it, and now time to load the folder, time to load the file. So this would help us env file and basically get the env file and set them into the environment of the process. The variables or the values stored in the .env file is saved in the environment of the process that is running. We can surely load it, and let's try to print it. So let's first ensure that there is no error over here. In case of any error, let's just print that whatever is the error. After that we can fetch our token from the environment, because at this point the value is present in the environment of the process. And if we try to print the token here and ensure that the same value is stored here, let's try to run this. So again, this is our .env file and the value saved is what was printed. So at this point we have our token with us. So whatever left is just to make two calls, get list of followers and get list of following, and check how many folks we follow don't follow us back. So we know that the endpoints which we'll be calling will always be constant. So let's define those endpoints over here. So one of the endpoints which we'll be using is base following URL, which is who we are following. And the second one being base follower URL. So once we have these two constant with us, what we are left with is to call a function which will be, fetching the data for the followers of the following from this URL. Start with the serious coding part. First, let me update this URL. Now let's create a function. So the job of this function would be to get, the data from the GitHub. So let's just call it fetch GitHub data. Also, if you are using Copilot, it's a bit annoying at points, but once you are habituated, you can use it for writing basic functions or comments around whatever you are using. So let's create a client, which is basically our HTTP client. We will be using this client to make the call to GitHub. And let's now create a request. So let's assign this value to HTTP. Basically, we are creating a new request. Cool. This makes sense. So what we'll be doing here is, it will create a new HTTP request with a method to be get, and this would be the base URL and the third parameter, which is the body. So are we using a body at this point? I don't think so. We don't need that. If error is not nil, let's just return the error with this after a small log. So for this, let's update the return type of the function. Cool. So what's left with us is to set the authorization token which we got. So for this, we can, in the request header, we can add an authorization, and again, as the Copilot suggests, we can set the value of the bearer token to the one we set in the environment. Cool. So after this, we have our bearer token, authorization is set. Now just time to call this endpoint. Let's do one thing. For the sake of this video, let's just disable Copilot. Cool. So a basic reload whenever you're trying to stop the Copilot. Cool. So at this point, we have just the errors and there's no code suggestion which we were getting earlier. And if the error is not nil, again, let's just, for the sake of it, let's just use a print statement. If you're using this kind of code as production, the best suggested way is to use a logger, because the logger gives you a lot of information, which is a topic of different video. So let's just, print here that fail to get response, or fail to, let's just say, making request. So at this point, what we are doing is making a request, like hitting the endpoint, and we were failed doing so. And at this point, let's just return an error. After this, what we can do is, so since we have the response body, now let's just check if that response status code shouldn't be anything else than 200. Basically 200 means that the status was okay, we were successfully able to get the data. And after this point, if the status code that we got from this request is not as 200, let's just return an error that let's just print an error first that received non 200 response. Cool. And at this point, let's just return an error that received a non 200 response. Cool. So at this point, we have made a request. We have made the request as well. We have made sure that the status for the response is not anything other than 200, meaning we have a good, correct response. Now it's time to read the body of the response. So for this, let's just read the response body here. If we get an error while reading the response body, cool. Now also let's just make sure that we have a structure for this users that we'll be getting. So basically this endpoints will be giving us an array of users in a paginated way, right? So let's just say that let's create a structure and let it just have a login data. Simple. So what we'll be doing here is, now let's just create an array of such users and let's call it user. Now since the values are colliding, let's just call it users. So the naming convention is not at par, but for this video let's just say that we write something like this. And again, if we are unable to unmarshal the body, which is the data that we got, into the array of users, basically the structure that we defined, and if that array is not equal to nil, we will be returning an error so what I'm doing here is I'm trying to unmarshal the response body into the array of user, and in case I face an error I would just return the error, and from here I can just return the users that I got. So at this point our function was just returning an error, so we need two responses here. One is the structure users and the second one is an error. So in all the cases wherever we were returning an error, a simple, also we are returning here an array of user. So wherever we are returning an error, we can just return a nil. So just returning nil here, here and here, and this is the successful case, and we won't be returning any error here. So let's just return the second parameter to be nil. Cool. So we have a function called as fetch GitHub data. Now let's call this function in our application. So let's just create two values here. Let's just call it user data, and the other value was error. So let's just print whatever user data is, and for the moment let's just comment out the token. Let's see. But why did we get an empty array? The thing is, we again use the token, but we didn't set here. We get, but why did we get an empty array? For that, I have added a print statement to the error here, and let's try to run the application again. Cannot marshal object into Go. So the thing is, why would this be happening? Let's just check our GitHub endpoint. Turns out the endpoint were wrong. So these are the mistakes that usually happen, but debugging is a skill that folks eventually learn, even if it was their own. Cool. So these are the values, and these are the list of people I follow, and there was no error so far. But why did I just get the handle names when in reality the response contains so much data? So as you saw, I made an array of users. Here users have a structure, and login is one of the parameters, and I just try to get that value. Is what I'm doing is, in the array of responses, I'm just getting the login parameter, which is the handle names, and this is what we're doing here as well. So we create an array of users, and we just had their handle names, and we are trying to marshal or transform the response into that array. So this function would help us get the GitHub data for my profile. But the thing is, don't you think I would have to create two functions, meaning one for the followers and one for the following? So rather than doing that, what I can actually do is just create another parameter here and call it a day. And wherever this is being used, I can just copy paste this value here, meaning that this would have following data, and this would have follower data. And if I print these two arrays, so I got the following and the followers data. But what we're looking for is the intersection of these two datas, meaning the folks that I follow and the folks who don't follow me back. So for this, let's create another function whose work will be to get the paginated data. So at this point, we are just getting 100 data for this, right? The max to max, by default we are getting 30, but there is no pagination, and there is no setting the default value from 30 to 100, meaning that we will be getting just 30 handle names on each call, and the value will always remain the same. So for this, let's just write another function called as fetch paginated data. And what this paginated data function would get is again tp's URL, which happens to be a string, and what this would return is an array of users and error. So basically we will be fetching all the users over here. Our page to be page 1, and let's run an infinite loop here, where basically we will be updating the URL to for setting the page parameter and the default values which will be fetching. So what I can do here is just set it to let's just say that page B um, whatever the integers being set here, which is basically the page number here, and the first value being the string, which is our ubase URL. So here we will be assigning, we will be setting the, so whenever we get a final string, the final string will be base URL followed by an and sign, page equal to sign, and the value for this person D would be whatever is being set here. So this is basically setting the page number. We also have to set the per page how many values we have to fetch. So we know that the maximum limit is 100 and we want to fetch the maximum limit. So let's just by default set it to 100. So here basically our URL will have two query parameters. First would be per page, which is 100, and second would be page, which will be set dynamically on every run. From here, what we'll be doing is we will be calling the function which we created earlier, which is fetch GitHub data, and here we will be passing the base URL. If we get an error, which is error not equal to nil, we return nil, which is the users, and the error which we got. And instead of sending the base URL, let's send in the modified URL with the per page and the page value. So let's do one thing, and every paginated call we make, let's just append it. So by this, if we make 4 to 5 calls, each time we will be appending the data in our original array. And but when would we know that okay, the pagination should stop? There are no more responses. If the length of the users array is less than 100, we know that okay, we have reached a dead end. There, let's just say there are just 30 to 40 users left, whereas our default value is 100, meaning that okay, we are at the end of the pagination. So let's just break from the infinite loop here, and at this point we expect we have no error with us. And if we call these functions over here, let's just see. Why wasn't my loop stopping? What seems to be an error? So if we look at the loop condition, we have forgotten to append the page. So if we run the program again, so these are the people who I follow, and this was printed because of this data here. Point we have two functions that would get us all the user data, whatever we are seeking. So we have two options. Option one is to use to store all the data of followers in an array, right? And store the list of people we follow in followings, and iterate through each of the followings and check if their value is present in follower or not. So if we were to see the time complexity of this, let's just say the length of the follower is n and the length of the followings is m. So the time complexity would come around n cross m. So at this point we are not trying to optimize our application, but we want to make sure that this doesn't have the worst time complexity possible. So let's just try to optimize this further. So one thing we know for sure is, first, what is more important for us? what we truly is important for us is the folks we follow. So what we can do is, another way of doing things would be to iterate over the following data, which are the folks who follow us, store it in the map, which is in Golang by default hash map. What is said about Golang maps is true or not. So to do this, we can just do a simple Google search. What data structure does Golang map implements? So the top result says one of the most useful data structure is hash table. Many hash table implements exist various properties, etc. Go provides a built-in map type implementation of a hash table. And if we search for the exact value that map type, the function allocates and initializes a hash map data structure and returns a map value that points to it. Meaning whatever I said was true. Now that we know that, we can store the data of followers in a hash table or hash map and try to fetch and check if any particular person who we follow happens to be in that map or not. Start by storing the followers data in a map. So for that, what we can do is, at this point we have fetched the followers and the following data. Let's prioritize this one over. If error is not equal to nil, basically we have an error. Let's just print the error, return from here and call it a day. Now time to populate all this array into a map. So for that, what we can do is follower map, and we can assign this to this value here. So let's just iterate over all the users in our followers data and set the value to be true. And after this, we have fetched the list of folks that we follow, and again, if there is an error, let's just print the error and call it a day. Now we have the data with us, and let's just have another array called as basically this will have the list of folks who don't follow us. And what we'll be doing now is we will be iterating through our following list and we will try to check if that data is present in this map or not. So if we found them here, then we can basically say that okay, the person we follow actually follows us back and we have no issues. But if they were not found, so we can append their name here. And if we proceed doing this, so hopefully we will have all the users who don't follow us back, and we can just go in here and try to print the data. let's run this application. So the person who doesn't follow me is layer5.io, which is understood because they are a GitHub organization. That completely makes sense. Now to check whether whatever I did was correct or not, let's just follow any random person. Let's just search for WWE star Randy Orton. Let's jump to his GitHub. Interesting. Really interesting. So let's just follow Mr. Dan Harrington over here. But as you see, they don't follow us back. So ideally, we should see their name over here. So as you can see, we have their username or the user handle over here, meaning the project that we made to fetch the list of people that we follow but they don't follow us back ideally works. So what's left for this is to make this project deployable. So at this point, we know that if we were to give this code to someone, to any other Golang developer, they would probably have Go in their system. They would, go and update their credentials over here and then run the go.main.file, and then they will be seeing the people who don't follow them. But can we make it easier? So, one funny thing in Golang is that we can actually build our program as a binary and give it to someone else. And this binary application can be done in a system which doesn't necessarily have Golang. How can we test it? So let's just build our program with the name of Unfollow, and if anyone were to use this binary anywhere like this, basically using the binary file, they could see the folks who don't follow them back. So at this point we understand that if we were just to provide this binary to anyone, and if they have their developer credentials with them, they can fetch the folks who don't follow them back on GitHub. But interesting thing would be to make a GitHub app that would take permission and take that user generated token and do this on their behalf. So that is what we will be doing next. We will be creating a GitHub app that will basically ask user for their permission, and we will be just taking the read permission for the user, nothing much, and we will try to deploy this entire thing. So when any user visits our website, they will be able to just authenticate themselves, and since we have their authenticated token, we will be able to show them the data of folks who don't follow them back. So that is what we will be doing ahead, and we will be using render to deploy our project. So that was it for this small video. Basically, we were talking about how we can use Golang, and as you can see, the writing syntax is way easier, and this code snippet would be present in the GitHub repo, and the link to that repo would be mentioned in the description of this video. Thank you. Wait, so you saw this entire video and you're still here watching me speak? Thank you. Thank you for being here. And I'm really hopeful that this video was helpful to you. And if really things go well, as I think they should, then we will be talking some more in-depth project around Golang, and we'll try to really since this is a basic project and many people will complain that this is like just a code snippet or git snippet, but this is what I wanted to start with, something that a newbie can start with, and would try to make videos which will get complex as we go. So as I said in the video as well, we will try to deploy this as a whole fledged app, have authorization in that, have this deployed. So basically our first basic Golang project would be deployed end to end, and that would be quite an interesting thing. And if that all goes successful, and if you folks actually like this video, then this kind of content, then surely we'll try to make more complex videos. Thank you for being here.